My cousin called it a girl's trip. A reset, she said. 5 days in Costa Rica. Tamarindo, which she'd been talking about since last January when her coworker went and came back with a tan and a whole new personality. I should have known something was off when she asked me to split the Airbnb 3 ways, even though there were four of us going. She said she'd cover the fourth share because her friend Lexi wasn't in a great place financially. I said okay. I always said okay. That's the thing about being the responsible one in the family. At some point, responsible stops meaning reliable and starts meaning available. Available to absorb whatever nobody else wants to deal with. I've been doing it for so long I didn't even notice anymore. My name is Ivy. I'm 28. At the time of this trip, I was working as a billing coordinator at a physical therapy clinic in Phoenix, making enough to live alone in a one-bedroom and save a little each month. Nothing glamorous. But I was steady, and my cousin, I'll call her my cousin because that's what she is, even now. She had always treated my steadiness like a resource she could borrow from. We've been close since we were kids. Her mom and my mom are sisters, and we grew up 3 streets apart, shared a locker in 7th grade, drove each other to prom. I was a bridesmaid at her wedding 2 years ago, stood up there in a dress the color of a bruise and smiled the whole time. When her marriage started falling apart last spring, I was the one she called at midnight. When she needed someone to co-sign on a new apartment because her credit was a mess, she asked me. I said no to that one, finally. She didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. But then the trip came up, and I thought maybe this is the reset we both need. Not just her. Me too. I've been exhausted in that particular way, where you don't even realize how tired you are until someone mentions rest and your whole body just caves toward the word. So I went. Lexi, I'd met once before, briefly, at a birthday dinner. She had the kind of loud confidence that fills a room before she even finishes a sentence. The fourth person was someone named Adrian, a friend of Lexi's, not of ours, someone my cousin had apparently met only twice. I didn't understand why she was invited. I didn't ask. We flew into Liberia and took a shuttle down to Tamarindo. The Airbnb was beautiful in the way that everything looks beautiful when you're running away from your actual life. Open-air kitchen, a pool, hammocks, the sound of something moving in the trees at night. I unpacked carefully. I put my passport and my wallet in the small safe in the closet because I'd read somewhere that beach towns have petty theft problems and I wasn't taking chances. The first 2 days were fine. We rented surfboard badly. We ate at a little soda on the corner that had the best rice and beans I've ever put in my mouth. We drank things out of coconuts. I took pictures of the sunset that I never ended up posting because by the time I got home, none of it felt like something I wanted to share. The tension started on day 3. It was small at first, the way it always is. Lexi made a comment over breakfast about how I'd reminded her twice about sunscreen like I was her mom. I hadn't thought of it that way. I sunburn easily and I assumed she did too. She's fair-skinned. I was being considerate. But she made a face and my cousin laughed and I felt something shrink inside me. That afternoon, they wanted to do a boat tour. One of those things where you go out and see wildlife and jump off into the water. It was $110 per person. I said sure, even though I'd already spent more than I'd budgeted for this trip. And I was starting to do the quiet math in my head that I do when money gets tight. On the boat, Adrian asked me what I did for work. I told her. She tilted her head the way people do when they're deciding whether something is interesting enough to keep asking about and decided it wasn't. She turned to Lexi and they talked for the rest of the ride about a music festival in Austin they were both going to in the fall. I sat at the back of the boat and watched for dolphins. That night we went to a bar on the beach. I had 2 drinks. Lexi had more than that. And Adrian had more than Lexi. And my cousin was somewhere in between, but loud about it. Around 11, I said I was going back. I had a headache, the real kind, not the excuse kind, and I wanted to sleep. My cousin grabbed my wrist. "Don't be like that," she said. "Like what?" "Like this, like you always are." I looked at her. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. I went back to the Airbnb alone, took some ibuprofen, and went to bed. I don't know exactly what happened at the bar after I left. I know they stayed until close. I know my cousin and Lexi had some kind of falling out with each other because by the time they got back to the Airbnb, there was a cold silence between them that I could feel through the wall. I know that when I woke up the next morning, the house felt wrong. I came out to the kitchen. Adrian was sitting at the table, scrolling her phone, drinking coffee she hadn't offered to make for anyone else. My cousin was on the couch, legs tucked up, not looking at me. Lexi was standing by the door with her suitcase. "What's going on?" I asked. My cousin looked up then. Her expression was strange. It took me a second to recognize it as guilt. "Change of plans," she said. "We're going to Manuel Antonio for the last 2 days. Lexi found a place." I waited. "Okay, let me grab my stuff. Ivy." She said my name the way you say it when you're about to say something you've already decided. It's just us three. You can take the Airbnb. It's already paid through Saturday." The room was very quiet. "I'm sorry. It's a smaller place. It's kind of a last-minute thing. The situation last night was just, I need to go. I need the change." I stood there in my pajamas, in a country that wasn't mine, and I understood what was happening. She wasn't inviting me. She was leaving me. "My passport is in the safe," I said. Not sure why that was the first thing I thought of, just that it was important. "You have the code," she said. And then she picked up her bag and walked out the door. Lexi followed. Adrian followed, not looking at me once. The front door clicked shut, and I heard the van she'd called idling in the road, and then the sound of tires pulling away, and then nothing. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I don't know why the floor. I just couldn't make it to a chair. Here's what I had: my phone, which was at 14% because I'd forgotten to plug it in. My pajamas. The safe in the closet, which had my passport, my debit card, my credit card, and $400 in cash that I'd brought for the trip. Here is what I didn't have: a plan, a flight, any idea what to do next. I sat on that floor for what felt like a long time but was probably 6 minutes. Then I got up, went to the closet, opened the safe, and took inventory. Passport. There. Debit card. There. Credit card. There. Cash there. Okay. I wasn't stranded with nothing. I was stranded alone in a place I didn't know, with 2 days left on a lease and no one coming for me. That was different. Worse in some ways, better in others. I charged my phone. While it charged, I sat on the edge of the bed and I let myself feel it, the full weight of what just happened, for exactly as long as it took the battery to get to 30%. I've learned to give myself a window. You can fall apart inside a window. Then I opened the Safari browser and started figuring out how to get home. The Airbnb was paid through Saturday. It was Thursday morning. My original return flight was Sunday out of Liberia. I pulled up the airline app and looked at what it would cost to move it up. $142 for Saturday morning if I left by 9, which meant getting a shuttle from Tamarindo to Liberia the night before and finding somewhere to sleep near the airport. Doable. I also looked at just keeping the Sunday flight and spending the extra day alone. I sat with both options. Then something shifted in me. Not dramatically, not like in a movie, just quietly, the way decisions sometimes settle. I thought, I am in Costa Rica. I saved for this trip. I took the time off work. She left. Not me. I decided to stay through Saturday, take my changed flight, and use the next 36 hours to actually be here. Not for her. Not for anyone. For me. I showered. I put on real clothes. I walked out of the Airbnb into the late morning heat, and I went and found that little soda on the corner, and I sat down and I ordered the rice and beans again and a coffee, and the woman who ran it, older, efficient, had the posture of someone who had been working hard her whole life and was completely at peace with that. She brought it out and said something in Spanish I didn't fully catch, and I said gracias, and she smiled, and that was that. I ate alone. The food was still just as good as it had been before. After breakfast, I went to the beach. Just sat there, watched some guy attempt to teach his kid to boogie board, the kid falling over and coming up laughing every time. I watched them for a while. There was something about it I needed to see, I think. Around 2 in the afternoon, I walked into a small surf shop that had a hand-painted sign and a ceiling fan moving the air around. The guy behind the counter was maybe 30, sunburned in the way people who work outside in tropical climates get. Not painful looking, just permanent. He asked if I needed something. I want to do something tomorrow that I wouldn't normally do, I said. I don't know why I said it like that. It just came out. He didn't seem fazed. Kayak tour leaves at 7. Estuary. You see crocodiles sometimes. How much? 65. Okay, I said. Sign me up. His name was Marco. He wrote my name down in a paper notebook with a pen that was almost out of ink. When he handed me the confirmation slip, a small printed card, the kind they run on a little desktop printer in the back, his handwriting on the line that said customer name was careful, like he was trying. I said thank you. He said see you at 7 and turned back to whatever he'd been doing. I walked back to the Airbnb in the late afternoon heat. The pool was right there and I'd barely used it. I went in. Alone. No music, no drinks. Just me and the water and the sound of whatever was in the trees. I floated on my back and looked at the sky, and I thought about my cousin. And I tried to figure out what I actually felt. Not betrayed. Or not only that, mostly I felt something closer to recognition. Like a picture had come into focus that had always been slightly blurry. I'd been filling in space for her for years, emotional space, financial space, the space of someone who would always say yes and always show up and always be the one who held things together. And the moment I'd opted out of one late night at a bar, the moment I'd been just slightly less available, the whole arrangement had broken. It's strange to grieve something you didn't realize you'd been trying to keep alive. That evening, I called my mom, not to tell her what happened. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet, but just to hear her voice. She talked about the neighbor's new dog, and whether she should repaint the kitchen cabinets, and whether the color she was considering was more gray or more blue. I listened and said, and yeah, that does sound more blue, and it was the best conversation I'd had in days. After we hung up, I ordered a pizza from a place I found on Google Maps and watched something mindless on my laptop and went to sleep early. The kayak tour was everything he'd said. We went out at 7 in the estuary, me and 5 other people, a guide named Sophia who spoke fast but made sure everyone understood. We didn't see a crocodile, but we saw a Jesus Christ lizard run across the water, which Sophia said was rarer, and she seemed genuinely excited about it, not in a performance of excitement way, but in the way of someone who has seen something many times and still finds it remarkable. A howler monkey watched us from a tree and seemed deeply unimpressed. I paddled hard and felt my arms burn. I got splashed and my phone got a little wet and I didn't care. When we got back to the put-out point, one of the other people on the tour, a woman maybe 10 years older than me, traveling alone for a conference in San Jose and tacking on a few days for herself, caught up to me walking up the beach and said, "You paddled like you had somewhere to be." I laughed. "I haven't had anywhere to be in a while," I said. We walked to a nearby juice bar and got smoothies and talked for an hour. Her name was Felicity. She was an occupational therapist from Minneapolis. She'd been divorced for a year and was still figuring out what her life looked like now. She said she'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. She said it plainly, like it wasn't a revelation, just a fact she'd arrived at. I thought about that the whole shuttle ride to Liberia. I stayed the night near the airport at a basic hotel, booked through the app, paid on my credit card, nothing fancy but clean and air-conditioned and quiet. I ate a mediocre chicken sandwich at the hotel restaurant and tipped well because I always do and watched the sky outside go from orange to dark. I thought about what I was going back to. Not my cousin, I was done thinking about her for now, but my actual life. My apartment, the commute, the way I'd been moving through things without really deciding anything. I thought, I'm not going back the same. Not in a dramatic way. Not, I've been transformed by hardship. More like, I'd been handed a very clear picture of what I'd been tolerating. And I couldn't unsee it now. The picture would come with me on the plane. The picture would sit in my apartment. And at some point, I was going to have to decide what to build around it. My flight home was mostly empty. I had a row to myself. Somewhere over Guatemala, I fell asleep and dreamed about nothing I can remember. When I landed in Phoenix, the air was that specific dry desert heat that hits you when you walk out of the terminal and it feels like opening an oven. It used to bother me. That day it felt like something. Like a rival. Like mine. My cousin texted me when I was waiting for my bag. "Hey, I hope the rest of the trip was okay. We should talk." I read it standing there at baggage claim, the carousel going, other people's suitcases coming around. I put my phone in my pocket. My bag came around. I grabbed it. I walked outside. I didn't respond that day. Or the next day, when I finally did, 2 weeks later, it was short. Not cruel, not dramatic, just honest. I told her that what she did hurt me, and that I'd been thinking about it, and that I wasn't going to keep making space in my life for someone who would leave me in the middle of a country I didn't know the moment being around me became inconvenient. I told her I loved her. I told her I didn't know what that was going to look like going forward. She called me twice. I let it go to voicemail. I'm not a person who cuts people off easily. I want to be clear about that. I don't enjoy conflict. I don't have a long history of dramatic relationship endings, but there's a difference between keeping a relationship that costs you something and keeping one that costs you everything. What I know now that I didn't know before I got on that plane. The version of me that would have called her back immediately, smoothed it over, made it okay for her comfort. That version had been exhausted for a long time. I'd just been too tired to notice. I kept the photo on my phone of the howler monkey looking down at us from that tree. Unimpressed. Unbothered. Unbothered that we were watching him. Unbothered that we were watching him. Unbothered that we had opinions. Unbothered about the whole situation, really. I've looked at it more than once since I got home, and every time I do, I think about Sophia saying, "Rare," with that genuine excitement in her voice. About Felicity at the juice bar saying she'd stopped apologizing for taking up space like it was just information, just something she knew now. About me, floating in that pool alone in the afternoon heat, looking at the sky. I made it back, not just to Phoenix. I'm still figuring out the rest of it. But for the first time in a long time, I'm figuring it out on my own terms. And I think that might be enough to start. I thought a lot about what actually happened in that kitchen. Not the logistics, those I had sorted within an hour. I mean, what happened underneath it. My cousin didn't wake up that morning and decide to be cruel. I don't think cruelty was even part of it. What she did was simpler and, in some ways, harder to argue with. She chose what was easy for her. She needed to leave. She had people willing to go with her, and I was, as I had always been, the one she assumed would handle the remainder. The inconvenience. The leftover details. Me. And the thing is, she wasn't entirely wrong to assume that. I had trained her to assume exactly that. Over years of quiet accommodation, every time I absorbed a cost she should have carried. Every time I said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. Every time I showed up so completely that my presence started to feel less like a choice and more like a guarantee. I had built a version of myself in her life that had no edges, no limits, no point at which I would simply say, "No, actually." This is where I stop. That's not her fault entirely. That's what I keep coming back to. What happened in that Airbnb was the result of a long chain of small decisions I had made over a long time, each one reasonable on its own, each one adding one more brick to a wall I built around my own needs. And when she walked out that door, when Lexi didn't look at me, when Adrian didn't say a word, what I was feeling wasn't just the shock of being left. It was the uncomfortable recognition of how I'd made it so easy. There's a kind of intelligence that only comes from being put in a situation you can't charm your way out of, can't smooth over, can't fix with extra effort or a good attitude. Sitting on that kitchen floor, I had none of my usual tools available. I couldn't manage the situation. I couldn't make everyone comfortable. I could only sit there with the truth of it, which was that I had spent years making myself indispensable to people who hadn't thought twice about leaving. What I did next was small, but it mattered. I got up, I checked what I actually had. I made a plan that was mine alone, not adjusted around anyone else's comfort, not designed to leave room for someone to change their mind and come back. I booked the kayak tour because I wanted to. I ate the rice and beans again because they were good, and I was hungry and I didn't need a reason beyond that. Felicity said she'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. I've turned that sentence over in my mind probably 100 times since I got back. It sounds simple. It isn't. Taking up space, your actual space, not the space left over after everyone else has taken theirs, requires a kind of quiet courage that nobody teaches you directly. You have to arrive at it through something: a loss, a door clicking shut, a morning where you are alone in a foreign country and the only person who can figure out what comes next is you. I'm not grateful my cousin left me there, but I am grateful for what I found out I was capable of when she did. Myself, mostly. Just myself. Steadier than I'd known. More resourceful. Less dependent on being needed than I thought. That howler monkey in the tree didn't care that we were watching. He just sat there, fully himself, completely unbothered by what anyone else was doing below him. I'm working on that.